What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Geek Pantheon, and today we have a very exciting episode. We are doing a review of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, the latest adventure from Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So we're going to be diving into it. I'm going to give you my insight onto what I think of the adventure, what I think they did really well, what could have been done better. And yeah, we're just going to break everything down. First off, I'm going to shrink myself down here, and we're going to do a spoiler-free section. So, if you are somebody that's thinking about playing this, or you're a dungeon master that enjoys just reading through, kind of experiencing the story, I'm not going to spoil anything yet. So don't worry about that. I will let you know when we are getting into spoiler territory. So first and foremost, I just want to take a look at this art real quick. It looks phenomenal, and surprisingly enough, that is not Thanos right there. That is one of the villains that you might be going up against over the course of the adventure. In fact, all of the potential villains are demonstrated right up here. In the very background, you have Xana Thar. Then you have I don't remember all of their names off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I read through all of it, not skimmed, but actually read. And I don't want to get into spoilers because some of these characters are recognizable, but Xanathar I feel like is so recognizable. He's already been on the cover of a 5e book, but and he features early on in the adventure. So it's not a spoiler to say Xanathar is involved. You're in Waterdeep and you're dealing with the criminal underworld. But those are all of the villains that you could potentially come up against. But it's a really well done adventure and something that I have been clamoring for a very long time is an actual honest to goodness faction system where you can find organizations, can become members, you can rise through the ranks, and you get benefits from that. And they did it with this one. There is an actual faction system with a ton of factions in Waterdeep, the Emerald Enclave, the Harpers. In fact, there are some villain organizations, like some of these people here, that you can join their faction and rank up. And it can create some interesting dilemmas for party members later on in the adventure, especially with one of the factions in particular. But it has a very cinematic feel. The way they've set up the fourth chapter of this adventure is a brilliant way of doing it. Once we get into spoilers, I'll actually break that down. But it's a very cinematic feeling adventure. Whereas a big complaint of a lot of 5e adventures thus far has been the sandboxiness, the lack of focus, the ease with which players can get lost. This, for the most part, fixes a lot of those problems. I would say chapters 1, 3, and 4 are very go get them. 3 is an investigation style chapter, but still there's a clear goal, there's a clear path. You're not just kind of wandering around trying to find something to do. So for the most part, it's very cinematic, very linear, which I like. It's a nice differentiation from the other 5e stuff that we've gotten, and there is some replayability given the fact that we have multiple villains for this adventure. You pick a villain based on the season of the year as the dungeon master, and so if you really want to be able to DM this, but then potentially down the road playing it without having things really past the first chapter spoiled for you, then pick a season and a villain. Like if you really want to run with Xanathar, you pick that season and you run it and you just don't look at the other parts of the book. Just avoid it. And then you go to play in a group and you tell them, listen, by the way, I ran this with Xanathar. I have not looked at any of the other villain stuff. So I would love to play in this, and I won't know what's going on once we hit a certain point. So I'd love to play, and you can come in as a player, not needing to do the whole separate your knowledge thing. Just you're good to go. So yeah, I really like that replayability. Um, but I will say the second chapter feels pretty empty. The second chapter let me down. In the spoiler section, I'm going to talk about ways I think you can improve that. But just as an overall assessment, chapter 2 was a bit of a letdown, and it's very short. Some of the fights, this is a personal preference thing. I don't mind this, but I want to let you all know so you can go into this adventure informed. Some of the fights are no-win scenarios. Like there is no conceivable way unless the bad guys roll like ones on every combat roll and the players roll 20s on every combat roll. Maybe then after a 4-hour combat can the players win. But There are some combat scenarios that are straight up no-win scenarios. They are designed for the players to be more creative. When I was talking to my wife about the adventure, I related it to The Hobbit. When Bilbo and the dwarves encounter Smaug, there's there's no way they can't beat him in combat, so they have to find another way to achieve their goals. It's similar to that. There are scenarios that your characters will find themselves in that they cannot win via combat. That can rub some people the wrong way. Some people want to have every possible solution be viable. That's not the case with some of these, though. If you get into a fight, you're going to die. Well, maybe they set fights up in such a way to where it might not equal the end of the campaign or the adventure if your players lose the fight. But it depends on the fight and it depends how the players conduct themselves. Um, the end of the adventure, it's a good conclusion while leaving things open for moving forward. It doesn't feel like, and come back in 2 months for Dungeon of the Mad Mage and see how the story ends. It doesn't feel like that. It is a self-contained, good 5-level story that if you want to run the next published adventure from Wizards of the Coast, you can, or you can take this off in 1,000 different directions. It has very much the first movie of a franchise kind of thing where it's a story, and if this is the only one that they do, you'll feel satisfied. But there's that little inkling that there might be a sequel coming. Um, Overall, it's one of my favorite adventures that WotC has done. It feels. I know I just said it has a good conclusion, which is about to sound contradictory to what I'm about to say, but it feels like the first volume of a Paizo adventure path for Pathfinder. It has that feeling of getting the story started while being a self-contained story, which I like. I like the adventure path system. I would love it if this may have been broken up into a trilogy of books, like it was this, and then we had a 10 through 5 or a 5 through 10 or a 5 through 12, and then all the way up to level 15 or 20 or however high they wanted to take it. Or even breaking up into 4, just 5 levels each. Just because Dungeon of the Mad Mage seems like such a big undertaking. It's a 23 level dungeon. But when that comes out, I'll have a review for you on that. Um, there are many different avenues of success and failure in this adventure, which I'm a huge fan of. I really like that. And there's a wide tapestry of NPCs for the party to interact with. It's really cool. The number of NPCs that are present from the get go, because you start off in the that's the end of my just overall vague. Here's what I think. I think it is worth a buy. I think it is a good adventure. It has some great magic items, some great new monsters. So I think it's worth a pickup, even if you're not sure if you're going to be able to run it anytime soon. Definitely check it out. I got my copy through D&D Beyond, so I didn't have to deal with the print price, which, it is only a 5-level adventure. So the cost versus what you're getting might cause some people to balk. But the big thing is there are 8 chapters, I think, in this adventure. I've talked about 4 of them thus far, because the last 4 chapters are the layers of the villains. And the idea being that the party might end up there, they might not. So there is some wiggle room to repurpose a lot of the stuff in this book for other games. So there's a lot going on here. I definitely recommend picking it up. Now we're about to get into spoiler territory. So if you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, click away now. Bye. Thank you for being here. If you want to stick around for spoilers and let me get deep into the book, then pull up a chair, sit down, and let's do this. So first and foremost, you start off in the Yawning Portal, which is great. And in the introduction of the book, they provide you with a drawing that's made the rounds on the internet, but I'm going to pull it up anyway, of the Yawning Portal. So you have the 3 layers and all of the various people that might be existing in the Yawning Portal. And I can zoom in. So yeah, there's Matt Mercer down there. Hello, Matt. But this is just a fun illustration. They actually give you in the handout section a list of people that the party will be able to interact with and engage with over the course of the adventure, which is really great. The introduction to this adventure is really, really cool. I like it a lot because there's a clear path moving forward. Um, like I said before, we get factions, which is great. There's a really cool flowchart in the introduction of the book that gives you a nice step by step of how the adventure is supposed to play out, and right next to it, a step by step of the story background. Like, how did we get here? And it's not a wall of text because sometimes that can be a little daunting. And also, if you're needing to use it for reference, you don't want a wall of text. This is a great flowchart that just allows you as a dungeon master to quickly reference this is what comes next in the history. If somebody's doing a investigation check to figure out, or a history check, how did we get to this point? You can have that reference right there. But yes, factions. We got factions, and there's a built-in renown system with actual benefits, and the adventure calls out those benefits at various points. Like if they are a member of this faction, then this can happen at this point. With if they have X number of renown and are this level, and it's great. And there's tables with different missions you can go on for the factions to gain renown. And oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this, and I want to play it so much. But they're, like I said, they're really well fleshed out NPCs introduced early on and throughout the story that you can constantly call back to. Although something they did to one of the NPCs, um, it's Maloon from Force Grey. Pretty messed up. Not gonna spoil it here, but yeah, when I read that, I was just like, what? Uh-uh. Another thing I want to call out, the art style of the maps. So if you've not gotten a chance to see what the maps look like in this book, I'm going to pull one up for you. This is for Troll Skull Alley, which plays a big role in chapters 2 and 3. But this is what every map looks like in the book. It's got the grids on it, which look great. I love this art style. I think it is a great blending of the hyper detailed, um, very beautiful, stylized, artistic maps that we get a lot of times. But there's just so much going on. Your eye can't settle anywhere. Versus your typical player handout map, which is like, looks like a fourth grader drew it with a crayon. Whereas this is that great middle ground. It's simple. It looks like somebody drew it. It looks like something that exists in the world of Waterdeep. But it the proportions are correct. You can actually use it on your table. I will say some of the maps, um, one specifically is Kolot Tower, which is a layer. I'm not going to get into who or anything. But with those particular maps, I'm concerned about the functionality of using them with minis because these are the only maps we have. So we have to take that into consideration that some people may want to use these with their minis on their table. And that one, the proportions are so small in relation to the grid that basically your party is going to have to walk single file through everything. So that's the biggest concern I have there. Um, but yeah, that's the only big concern that I have. Anyway, that's all of the images that I want to show you all. So I'm going to make myself big again. Um, so anyway, yeah, I love the art style in both the maps and the art throughout the book. It is gorgeous. Lots of things that can spark your creativity. Um, Great starting point for the adventure. You meet up with Volo of Volo's Guide to Monsters in the Yawning Portal. So two source books butting heads in the middle of an adventure. I know Tales from the Yawning Portal was technically an adventure, but it wasn't like an adventure. You could mash everything together. Anyway, it introduces some of the major players in the story early on, particularly one. There's one person that is going to be very important throughout the entire adventure that's introduced in chapter 1. It moves at a good pace. It has an engaging goal. You're constantly moving forward. There's not kind of that waffling of like, oh, okay, so what do we do? Like Volo is like, hey, you all look like adventurers. I need help. Here's some gold up front. Please go do this thing. And then when you get back, I will give you more gold. So very straightforward, but good. Chapter 2 has some issues. It mostly suffers from a lack of direction, I would say. So essentially, getting into story spoilers, Volo gives the party a abandoned tavern in Troll Skull Alley, that map I showed you. Um, and I was really intrigued initially because it was like a poltergeist lives there, and so maybe maybe the poltergeist plays into the overarching story. I was wrong. The options are either kill it or renovate the tavern and it becomes your friend, and that's it. You don't learn anything from the poltergeist. There's nothing to learn from the poltergeist. It's the former owner of the bar that died that never wants to leave. So fixing up the tavern is a cool concept and a huge money sink. I like it, but it doesn't feel like that should be the central focus of the chapter, which I felt like it was. The chapter also lays out some really cool stuff with the factions, and I would thrust that to the forefront of this adventure. I would make it all about make it about the adventures really solidifying themselves in Waterdeep, like becoming part of social circles, becoming part of the city through the faction stuff and through building the tavern because they're tavern owners, so that will facilitate them getting to know people. Um, and there's a sidebar option for like a rival tavern owner that's really cool. I would bring basically everything that's optional in this chapter. I would make the story about that. Because having the tavern and really caring about this section of the city becomes important in chapter 3. You really need to make them care about the city, or else they're going to leave the city. Like there's nothing to keep them here yet. The big story doesn't start until chapter 3. Um, so I would highlight the quests for the factions because that's where you get that table of the different quests you can go on to raise your renown with the factions. Um, and I would highlight that. I would make if everyone or the majority of the party is within the same faction because you only have a pretty limited number. I would steal quests from other factions that nobody's a part of that thematically makes sense. Like if they're members of like the Drow spy organization, which you have to be a Drow. So never if they're members of the Harpers, which are also spies, pull some quests from the Drow spy network that obviously aren't innately evil. Or if they're members of Order of the Gauntlet, maybe pull in some Emerald Enclave stuff that would make sense if nobody's a member of that. Just to pad out that list, or make some of your own up. Chapter 3 gets things back on track though. And one thing I love about it is so basically a fireball explodes outside their tavern on the street, kills some people. It's crazy. There's a crime scene. But the police do show up. The party has the opportunity to investigate things before the police arrive, which is cool. But I like the fact that the cops do play a role in it. Sorry, my dog is being needy. Um, but one thing I love is once things really start going and like picking up the pace, going and telling the cops what's going on is a viable option that the adventure has in there. The party can absolutely go to the police and say, hey, this is what we found out. This is what's going on. Would you all like to go take care of it? Rather than us going and trespassing on someone else's property and potentially committing murder. Because the adventure does make a big deal of following the law in Waterdeep and what happens to people that break the law. So the fact that they allow you to interact with the police in a meaningful and productive way is great. I love that they included that. Um, Also in chapter 3, when they when they're talking about investigating a villa that the adventure takes you to, it drops a wonderful rule on us that might have been another source book. I've just missed it up to this point. I don't know. This is the first time I've seen it, but I'm going to read it verbatim from the book. Sneaking in or out of the villa without being seen or heard by neighbors and passersby requires each character to succeed on a DC 15 dexterity stealth check. Okay, so that's not nothing. A majority of your party is going to be less than 50% likely to do that. A character who has proficiency in the stealth skill can take disadvantage on the check to grant advantage to another party member's check, essentially compensating for less stealthy companions. That's just great. That's wonderful. I love it. Chef's kiss. Mwah. It's it's a great idea. It's a great way to balance things out amongst the party to allow somebody that has a +5 or 6 stealth modifier to make up for your paladin in heavy armor. um, so yeah, I really like that. I dig it. Um, and so yeah, it's great, 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 great. Um, I want to jump back to the relationship that you can form with the City Watch is a really nice addition because the same two officers are reoccurring throughout the story. And so it sets up the potential for you to form either like a Jim Gordon or a Javert relationship. Yes, I did just use both Batman and Les Mis in my D&D review. Um, but it sets that dichotomy up to where if you're really cooperative, albeit a little rough around the edges, you can have your own personal Jim Gordons that are like, okay, we're on the force. We're going to give you some tips, but just let us do our job. Or you can have a Javert like hunting you all down because you are criminals, regardless of whether or not you're trying to do good. You are criminals. You commit crimes and you deserve to be in jail. Um, Next up, chapter 4 is the potential climax of the story. The whole concept of this chapter is brilliant to me. I love it. It's something called the Encounter Chain, which I have not seen another published D&D 5e adventure. But it's a great way of creating unique storylines with minimal effort. Because if you all listen to the Knowledge Check, my D&D 5th edition discussion podcast, my co-host Philip, we talked about the DM spellbook, where you can create neutral encounters that you can plug in anywhere. That's this idea, and this is how those should be used. Because essentially what they've done is they've created 10 encounters, like 10 locations with rooms, doors, everything. And based on the villain that you're going after, the order you go through 8 encounters. So there's 2 extras, but they reorder them. So you're going around the city trying to track down the MacGuffin, but depending on the villain, you start in either A, B, C, or D, and you end up in completely different places, which is an awesome concept. And I'm not doing it justice with my description. You just need to go check it out. It is great and a really fun way to do it. Um, and I know we're running a little long on the review, so I'm going to pick things up. Um, the weather conditions are also an excellent addition. There's a moment in the courthouse encounter for the summer storyline that makes me want to abandon my initial choice of the winter storyline and go to summer. Um, it's great. The keys that you have to find to get into the vault are hysterical. Okay. Then there's a confrontation with an adult gold dragon. Yes. At this point, the party is maybe level 5, probably level 4. And they have an encounter with an adult gold dragon. This is what I'm talking about when I say no win encounters. If you go to fight this thing, the party dies. Um, but if the party attempts to deceive the adult gold dragon, this is another mechanic instance that, it's good, but it's tough. If they try to deceive the adult gold dragon, everybody in the party has to make a deception check, and they have to pass. And that just evokes such a cinematic moment of like the the group of criminals trying to talk their way out of a situation, and the face man is obviously up there talking with the smile, and person like the engineering person is in the background that doesn't like talking to people and is just fidgeting and looking super nervous. That tips off whoever you're trying to lie to that something's up. And that replicates this moment perfectly of like, everybody give me a deception check. Anybody fail? Okay, then the jig is up. It's punishing. It's really hard. You're probably going to fail as a party, but it's realistic. And that's kind of nice. The rest of the chapters are various villains' layers, all of which have really good flavor, feel really unique and different. Then you have Volo's Enchiridion, I think is the way you pronounce it. I might be butchering that. Basically, it's Volo's Guide to Waterdeep, which is really cool. There's some great artwork in it. It's a really fun take of a person's experience in Waterdeep, and the adventure encourages you to give this to your players to read because they know Volo, and so if they ask Volo, "Hey, we're new in town, what should we go check out?" He would hand them his pamphlet that he's written of like, "Oh, well, here's a free copy," which is really cool. So, like I said before, overall, great adventure. I love it. It's really good. Sorry the review ran a little bit long, but I wanted to get into details with you all. Um, but I would highly recommend it. I would love to play through it. I'm looking forward to probably running it because I am a resident DM. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a fun read. I'd recommend picking it up anywhere that you can at your local game stores. At this point, it launches everywhere in, I believe, just over a week. Or you can get it on D&D Beyond or Fantasy Grounds, I think. But yeah, it's a great adventure. I loved it. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. And yeah, if you want to be a part of the conversation, head on over to our Facebook group, the Geek Pantheon. And if you like what we do and would like to see it done just a little bit better, we do have a Patreon, link down in the description, patreon.com/the Geek Pantheon. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.